Hello, my name is Lynn Pelto. I'm an art teacher at West Boylston High School in Massachusetts. This is a tutorial in clay. I'm going to show you how to throw a pot on the potter's wheel. Making a pot on the potter's wheel is called throwing. Here are the tools used to throw a pot on the wheel. You will see these explained during the tutorial. We have the wooden trimming stick, the pin tool, the wooden rib, sponges, and a wire tool. The most important part of throwing a pot is to get it centered on the wheel. Take enough time to do this right, as it will make the rest of the process easier. Pressure is applied with the heel of the hand to force the clay inward and on center. I am right-handed, so I use my right hand to apply pressure. The left hand is used to guide the form and to feel the balance of the clay. If the clay is wobbling side to side, it is not yet centered. If the clay is perfectly still to the touch, it is centered. As pressure is applied to the clay, the form naturally gets narrower and taller. It is important to keep the clay wet and slippery so your fingers glide easily and don't stick and catch on the clay. I dip my hands into a nearby water bucket frequently. Once you have pulled the clay up, you also need to push the clay back down. Pressure is applied with the top of the thumb. This downward pressure naturally makes the clay form get shorter and wider. Air bubbles can throw the clay off center. You can usually feel them when they come to the surface during centering. Here I am using the pin tool to pop the bubble. After making holes in the bubble, I use my thumb to smooth the clay and force the air out. Once the bubble is gone, I can continue to center. You should bring the clay up and down 2 or 3 times to make sure it is centered properly. There should be no wobbly movement, but it should be perfectly still to the touch. Once it is centered, you are ready to open the pot. Opening the pot is done with the thumb. You push downward in the direct center of the form until about 3/4 inches from the wheel. This will leave enough clay for the bottom of your pot, plus a little extra for trimming the foot on the pot. A bent thumb is used to pull the clay outward to expand the desired opening. If you are throwing a pot with a flat bottom, you pull straight across. If you are making a curved bottom, like a bowl, you guide the bottom out and up at the same time. Here I am shaping the bottom for a bowl. I am using a sponge to shape and smooth as I open the bowl. Again, it is important to keep the clay wet and slippery so your fingers glide easily and don't stick and catch on the clay. I am going to use the pin tool to trim off the rim to make sure the top is even before I continue to form the bowl. This will help to ensure the rim is even on the finished bowl. I position the pin tool perpendicular to the bowl and slowly press in from the outside until the pin cuts all the way through. I am using my left hand as a guide and to grab the excess clay once it is cut off. Once this trimmed piece is removed, the top of the bowl is perfectly flat. The piece that I took off is actually thinner than it looks in this picture. Now I can begin to raise the pot. I position my hands so that the right hand fingers, outside, are slightly below the left hand fingers, inside. Inward pressure is applied with the right hand while at the same time pulling up. This naturally forces the clay to get taller. I use the left hand to guide the clay up. It takes several passes to raise the clay to the desired height. Take your time to guide and smooth and keep the pot on center. Each time you raise the pot a little higher, the walls will get thinner. If you are making a form that is wider at the top than the bottom, you want to leave the clay thicker at the top, because when you start to widen the rim, it will get thinner. I am using the pin tool again to trim a little piece off the top. so the rim stays perfectly even when I begin to widen the shape into a bowl. I switch the pressure from my right hand to my left hand as I begin to form the bowl. I am now pressing on the inside as I come up the form and using my right hand on the outside to guide it. Pressure on the inside and the momentum of the wheel turning naturally forces the form to widen. You want to apply pressure gently as the bowl will open easily. Pressing too heavily can cause your form to open too quickly, get too thin, or go off-center. Make several passes, widening the bowl each time until the desired shape is reached. The left hand is in charge of defining the shape from the inside. The right hand is used to guide and keep it from widening too fast. You want to keep the thickness of the clay uniform from top to bottom. Your finished bowl should be 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch thick. Use the sponge to smooth the surface and soak up any excess water. Do the same on the outside. Use the sponge to smooth the rim. I am using the wooden trimming tool to undercut part of the clay from the bottom of the pot. I apply pressure gently until the tool makes contact with the wheel, then press gently outward to separate the extra clay away from the pot. I use the pin tool to cut away the excess clay. The undercut not only gets rid of excess clay, it allows the pot to be lifted from underneath to take it off the wheel. I decided to leave the bowl on the wheel for about a half an hour to let it set and allow some of the moisture to evaporate. This makes it a more solid form and easier to move without distorting the shape. I use the wire tool to cut it off the wheel. I press the wire tool to the wheel and with the wheel turning, drag it underneath the pot until it is cut. It is easier than it seems. The turning wheel does the work for you as you drag the wire towards you. There are two ways to lift a pot from the wheel. You can try to establish equal pressure points with your fingers, grab from underneath, and lift. If you make finger marks at the very bottom, they will be later trimmed off. You can also use tools called pot lifters that slide under the pot. These are nice if you don't want to distort the rim of a wide shape like a bowl. I place my bowl on a wooden board to dry. This will help to draw some of the water from underneath as it dries. Let the piece dry until it is leather hard. This means it is set in its shape, is pretty solid, and you don't change the shape when you handle it. It is still soft enough to trim with tools. It darkens and feels cool to the touch as it dries. This one is ready to trim. These are my trimming tools. They have sharp edges to trim away clay and come in various shapes and sizes. Put the pot on the wheel upside down and center it by gently turning the wheel and guiding towards center with your fingers. When it no longer wobbles and you can touch your fingers against one side without them moving, it is centered. Turn the wheel slowly or it might fly off. Secure the pot in place by taking 3 equal pieces of soft clay and placing them on the wheel around the pot. Press them down to stick them to the wheel. While you are doing this, periodically spin the wheel slowly to make sure your pot is still on center. These lumps of clay will hold your pot in place while you are trimming. Start with a tool that will take small amounts off until you get the pot smooth. With the wheel turning, apply pressure enough to trim excess clay from the pot. You must hold your hand steady while doing this. Once the sides are smooth, you can smooth the top as well. Apply downward pressure, again keeping your hand steady. Start from the center and work your way out, using the motion of the wheel to assist you. Once smoothed, you can use bigger tools to take off larger strips of clay. Shape the outside of the bowl to match the inside shape. Leave a foot on your bowl, about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch thick, the same as the bowl itself. As you gain experience, you will learn to gauge the thickness of the bottom by tapping it. You can tell by the sound and by the solidity of the clay. Reduce the thickness of the bottom by trimming inside the foot. You started with about 3/4 inch and need to thin to a similar thickness to the rest of the bowl. If the bottom is too thick or too thin, it will not dry at the same rate as the rest of the bowl and may crack. Smooth the surface with one of the wider tools. Sponge off your finished piece and give yourself credit for your work. After drying thoroughly, your piece will be ready for firing and glazing. Thanks to Mari Pelto for photographing me while I threw the bowl for this tutorial. Good luck!